Hello, welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast. My name is William Hemsworth. Thank you so much for joining me for today's program. Well, first and foremost, over the last couple of weeks, you may have noticed that there have not been any new shows. I was kind of on a brief hiatus. Sometimes you just have to step back. You have to refresh, regroup. So we're starting back today. Let's kind of call it Season 2. We're going to continue on in Matthew chapter 17. And as you may recall, a couple weeks ago, we left off we started talking about the transfiguration. And so today we are continuing on within the transfiguration. We're going to look at verses 4, 5, and 6 in Matthew chapter 17. So Matthew chapter 17, verses 4 through 6 say, "And Peter said to Jesus, 'Lord, it is well that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 booths here, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah.' He was still speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, 'This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him.' When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces, and were filled with awe." So in verse 4, Peter says, let's build 3 booths. In some translations you may read Peter say, let us erect 3 tents, if you will. And so here Peter is wanting to prolong this heavenly experience that he's experiencing. And so these booths are small. Like I said before, just a second ago, some translations have it listed as tents. So yeah, they're like small tent-like shelters, and they're erected once a year on the Jewish feast of booths. And we see that in Leviticus chapter 23, verses 39 through 43. Later on within the early church, this became a symbol of the joys of heaven. And in verse 5, we hear God the Father, the first person of the Blessed Trinity, saying, this is my beloved Son, listen to him. This is very similar to what we hear at Jesus' baptism in Matthew chapter 3, verse 17. Now, there's a key difference. We hear the words of God the Father saying, listen to him. God's saying, listen to him. Telling the disciples, listen to Jesus. Listen to my Son. He's kind of saying that to us today as well. Not kind of, he is saying that to us today as well. Listen to him. It also brings to mind Deuteronomy 18:15, where God promised a prophet like Moses. I remember Matthew in several places compares Jesus, calls him the new Moses. This is not coincidental. And in verse 6, we read about the disciples falling on their faces because they're filled with awe. This is that posture that we see throughout Scripture when someone is overwhelmed by God's glory. So what can we learn from these 3 verses today? Well, I think the key we've talked about several times already. Listen to him. Listen to Jesus. See, a lot of times we may try to rationalize whatever sin we're caught up in, rationalize trying to do some kind of wrong, but in the end, we need to listen to Jesus. Are we listening to Jesus today? Are we in awe of what Christ has done for us, or is it just kind of a casual, whatever? Let's listen to Jesus. If we listen to Jesus, it's going to translate into every other aspect of our life. So thank you for joining me on today's episode of the Daily Bible Podcast, and thank you for your understanding for my just wanting to refresh and come back to this show and all my shows. This is one of 4 shows I have, guys. But thank you for joining me. Thank you for your patience, and God bless you.